All right, and welcome. I am your host, Alex. Welcome to the Cyberpunk Matrix YouTube channel. So I haven't done one of these in a while. It's mostly been podcasts and stuff like that. But I wanted to give you a bit of a new start, so to speak. So I'm going to be trying to do this more often, where I'm just speaking to the camera and talking about Cyberpunk issues and what I see and what I'm thinking about Cyberpunk, kind of like a Cyberpunk show, if you will. And so today I thought I'd start off the new series by talking about some of the questions that I ask my guests. So as you know, we have a Cyberpunk Matrix podcast, and a lot of the guests come on the show and I ask them questions about what is Cyberpunk to them. Where did they first discover it? What do they know about it? What does it mean to them? What are their favorite Cyberpunk pieces? What are they looking forward to? What's the state of Cyberpunk today? And so I thought I would turn around the camera to myself and answer some of those questions myself. It's really frustrating because when I look for Cyberpunk content online, anytime I Google Cyberpunk, I always receive the results Cyberpunk 2077. And granted, the game is great. I like it a lot, or I liked it a lot when I played it that first time. I got it right when it came out. I was really excited. But Cyberpunk is a lot more than just Cyberpunk 2077. It's not just a video game. It's also a genre. It existed well before the game. And now, whenever you look for the status of the Cyberpunk genre, all you get is people playing the game with 200 hours, their thoughts, their reviews, all this stuff. And so it's a bit challenging to find proper Cyberpunk content, you know what I mean? So today I'm going to be talking about my thoughts on Cyberpunk and kind of answering my own questions that I usually ask my guests, okay? So let's get started. Question number one, what is Cyberpunk for you? So for me, Cyberpunk is really high-tech and low-life. It's really a genre, a subset of science fiction that describes a dystopian future with low-life punks usually, or people who are low-income, downtrodden, trying to make ends meet, living in difficult situations, often under oppression, often under difficult and expensive subscriptions for body augmentations or whatever with mega corporations or with the totalitarian government. And they often have to deal with high-tech stuff, so things that for us is very high-tech. Now, it's not a space opera, so I would not consider Star Wars to be cyberpunk, nor is it science fiction horror like Alien. I would also not consider Alien to be cyberpunk, but there are elements of it that merge with the genre of cyberpunk, so you can consider it like that. But yeah, it's a wonderful, exciting genre, inspired by noir detective films, but set in a future, a dystopian future. And it often talks about issues of inequality and identity and humanity and the rights of people in difficult situations. Yeah. When did you discover Cyberpunk? So I discovered Cyberpunk in 2018. So I was always interested in Cyberpunk type content. I loved The Matrix when it first came out. I actually watched the second one first and was very confused, and then I watched the first one, and then I loved it, and then I consumed everything Matrix that I could find. But I didn't actually like Blade Runner at first. Now it's starting to grow on me. And I know that's a bit of heresy to say for big Cyberpunk fans, but maybe it's something that's an acquired taste that just needs to grow on you, and it hasn't quite matured on me enough yet. But the more that I'm in the Cyberpunk genre, the more I keep on looking at pictures and videos and Blade Runner content, so who knows, maybe I'll be really into it. I did love the sequel though, of course. I have the poster right here for Blade Runner 2049, I believe. Yeah. Anyways, yeah, I discovered Cyberpunk when I don't know, I found it on the internet. I was Googling something, and then I found the definition on Neon Dystopia, which is a great Cyberpunk website that has kind of all kinds of Cyberpunk content, but goes really in depth. So that was very interesting, and that led me to read Neuromancer and rewatch Blade Runner and then I watched Akira as well, and I read Snow Crash, and so, Akira, Blade Runner, Snow Crash, and Neuromancer was really my initiation into cyberpunk. And I did that because I read a bit of, the foundational material on Neon Dystopia. But the problem is that Neon Dystopia and most other websites out there do not give you a definitive path forward, a definitive way to consume cyberpunk media if you want to get into the genre. Like, there was no path. It was just, these are the two things that started it. These are some things that are big. They didn't give me a lot of information in like a general summary format. And I really wanted to have something like that. So what I did was I created my own website, cyberpunkmatrix.com, which is really a matrix. The idea is that it's a matrix of the cyberpunk genre and cyberpunk content that's out there. So it's new, it's old, it's referenced in the library of content. I'm still working on kind of how to organize that content. But basically, you have a lot of reviews on past important cyberpunk works, always with a scale out of 10, with the director, the actors, the scene, the plot, the story, the flow, all these things, the music, things that I notice in each film. And then the other thing is it's a bit of everything. So now the website reviews music, TV shows, video games, news. News has been a bit less, but sometimes a news story is so cyberpunk that I have to talk about it, like the Cybertruck from Tesla, or drones flying and filming what we're doing or whatnot. That's why I started the cyberpunkmatrix.com website. And that's how I discovered cyberpunk, is through proxy, by finding a blog online that mentioned a lot of the content that I happened to like. And then I learned that it was a thing, it was a genre. What is your favorite cyberpunk content? My favorite cyberpunk content would definitely be the Matrix trilogy. Obviously, it's in the name, Cyberpunk Matrix. I just combined the two things that I love. And so for me, the Matrix trilogy is just, you can't get better. You can't get better than the Matrix trilogy. I watched the Matrix in 2003, I believe, when I saw Reloaded. So I saw Reloaded first, and then the original, and then I saw Revolutions when it came out in theaters. And 1 and 2 really is just, you can't get better kind of film for the music, the action, the philosophical questions, the dialogue, the acting, the setting, the cinematography, the fast-paced. It's beautiful. You can't beat it. And so then the Matrix 4 came out, and that was good, but just you can't measure up to the brilliance of Matrix 1 and 2, and I think most people would agree with me on that. So Matrix is definitely my favorite cyberpunk content, but I also really like Ghost in the Shell. I liked the live-action movie, although a lot of people didn't like that. I liked the anime a lot too, so both of them I really enjoyed. The original anime movie. And so Ghost in the Shell and The Matrix, to me, are my two top favorite cyberpunk pieces of all time. When did I start Cyberpunk Matrix? That was in 2018, because I wanted to have a center for information that I couldn't find elsewhere, and also it would be a way for me to express my love of cyberpunk, especially as things come out. So Cyberpunk Matrix came out before it was announced that Matrix 4 would be coming out, so Matrix Resurrections. And so I followed that news, and I posted about the news and the acting and the process as it happened through quarantine and whatnot, through COVID. And it's been really fun to post about things since then. We've had Love, Death, and Robots come out, Uploads Season 1 and 2. Shortly after I started the blog, I saw Battle Angel Alita, so I watched the anime movie of it, and then I watched the live action, which I thought was quite good as well. And every time that there's a new really big cyberpunk media that comes out, I will watch it and then review it, and it's really exciting to kind of distill my thoughts and put it somewhere and then see what other people think about that too. So hopefully people come to me as a source of information and thoughts on the Cyberpunk content, and hopefully you can come and give your own thoughts as well, dear viewer. When did I start the Matrix podcast, Cyberpunk Matrix Podcast? So I started that shortly after, I think about a year or 2 years after, no, 2 years after Cyberpunk Matrix blog. In 2018, in the fall, I moved to France from the United States. And I lived there for 2 years and continued the blog there. And then in around 2020 is when I really started the podcast. And so it's really fun for me to interview people in the cyberpunk sphere. And I feel like I can kind of make friends, not friends, but like acquaintances and people I can get to know kind of really well. So I've interviewed writers, YouTube content creators. I have interviewed friends, just personal friends to me, to see what their thoughts are. I interviewed my wife. I interviewed, different kinds of people. So it's not just cyberpunk fans. I've interviewed like 3 or 4 different cyberpunk writers. So obviously they're very much in cyberpunk writing communities. But then I interviewed like cyberpunk content creators who were just creating, websites or blogs. I interviewed one of the chief editors at Neon Dystopia, which was really exciting. So getting all these different perspectives, and each person I asked them, what is cyberpunk to you? How did you discover it? What is your favorite content? And then through the same questions, I can kind of glean a bit of information on what people think. So it's interesting. I asked one person and they said that to them, pretty much anything you wanted to be cyberpunk is cyberpunk, because you make your own definition. So that would include things like Alien. Whereas others are like, well, no, it has to be like high-tech, low-life. It has to be dystopian. It has to be some mega corporation. And there are sliders for both, like how much high-tech, how much low-life. It can be as much as you want for each part, but you need both parts in there. And so a space opera like Star Wars would not be cyberpunk. I agree with that, but not everyone does. And definitely sometimes there are parts in the Star Wars saga that seem to come pretty close to cyberpunk, like certain scenes on Coruscant in the original 6 or 9 movies, and also more recently with some episodes of The Mandalorian or Boba Fett. And coming up, there may be some scenes in Kenobi. Who knows? But again, those are elements of cyberpunk, but Star Wars in general is not cyberpunk. There are too many aliens. It is not dystopian enough. It's not, well, to me, it's not cyberpunk. But I'm open to different points of view. Obviously, my opinion is not definitive. That's just how I feel about it. Everyone has their own voice. Everyone thinks what they want to think. What is the state of cyberpunk today? Well, I think the state of cyberpunk is really good. It took a hit. It took a couple hits, with Altered Carbon Season 2 not doing so well, and then Cowboy Bebop live action being canceled after the first season, and then Matrix Resurrections being good, but a pretty big bust in terms of expectations. A lot of people didn't like it. It was very polarizing. When I came out of the movie theater, when I saw Matrix Resurrections in the premiere in London, I was amazed. I thought it was so much fun. And then when I watched it a second or third time, I was able to process more, and the pace felt slower to me because I kind of knew what was coming and what was going on. Whereas the first time when I watched it, it felt like a very, very fast paced and was very exhilarating. And then, little things or slightly bigger things were kind of pointed out to me, and then when I took the time to notice it, I said, okay, well, yeah, that wasn't quite as well done as it could have been, or that was a bit lacking, or, but in general, I really liked the movie. But the state of cyberpunk, again, also with Cyberpunk 2077, so many bugs that came out when the game was first released, and then, Sony in their store pulled the game, the online version at least, I think. And so that was a real disappointment to a lot of people, but they've done so many patches, and in general it's still very playable. I really enjoyed the game, and I think it's just going to keep on growing, honestly. Like, people will still buy it. They brought the price down, and then a bunch of more people bought the game who were hesitating because they don't want to pay the $60 or €60 price point. But if it's €30, then that's something they would be willing to buy. I can understand that because I also wait for games to lower in price. I don't usually buy them when they come out, but Cyberpunk 2077 was an exception. But yeah, so the game itself is huge in bringing attention to the cyberpunk genre. We had Blade Runner 2049, we had Battle Angel Alita, we had Matrix Resurrections, all these, and then we had Ready Player One, even directed by Steven Spielberg. Or yeah, I think it was Steven Spielberg. So these are kind of like, it's becoming more and more in the focus of the media and people's attention. Also, Elon Musk, of all people, is really bringing a lot of attention to Cyberpunk because I think he's a huge Cyberpunk fan himself. I mean, I don't think he's come out and said it per se, but the way that he presented the Cybertruck and how he keeps on having kind of like Cyberpunk influences in content that he's releasing or talking about in relation to Tesla and to some of his tweets, I think he's a big fan. And so a lot of attention is brought to him, and then it's brought to the genre as well. And of course, we have Keanu Reeves that everyone likes with John Wick series, and he's kind of like the Hollywood sweetheart. And so since he was in Resurrections, a lot of people watched because of that too. So I think the state of Cyberpunk is really good. For Cyberpunk writers, I think the state is pretty good. I recently talked to a writer who thought that it was not going so well for Cyberpunk writing specifically, because it's hard for them to get their works read and published and out there, so they have to publish independently. That's not for me to say though, because I'm not a writer. I'm just an interviewer and a fan of the genre. Is there any Cyberpunk content you were looking forward to? I would say I'm really excited. It keeps on changing, right? So like when I always do a year in review, and at the end of last year, I said, all we have to look forward to is Magic the Gathering, of all things, was coming out with a series that was very Cyberpunk themed, an edition of their cards called Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. And so that came out in February, I believe. And then we got, in March, Season 2 of Upload. So those are the two things I knew was coming out. But for the whole year, I was like, what else is there? Matrix Resurrections already came out. Cowboy Bebop already came out. The only thing we have to look forward to is the Edge Runners anime series on Netflix based on the Cyberpunk 2077 video game, which that is really exciting. It's supposed to release this year, I think, but still no mention of when, what date. And in my opinion, I think it's probably just going to drop randomly on Netflix. One day we'll wake up and it'll be there, and we'll be like, oh my gosh, the anime. So we'll be watching that. But more recently, it was just announced that Love, Death, and Robots Season 3 is coming out, and there was a little trailer for that. So I'm really excited to see that Season 3. But of course, with Love, Death, and Robots, it's not all Cyberpunk. It's great content. It's fantasy, and it's individual short films for each episode. But if you take a full, 15 episodes, there'll usually be like half or a quarter that are actually Cyberpunk. And Season 2, there are only like 8 episodes or so. So of those, again, not all of them were Cyberpunk related. I think there were like 3. So we'll see what happens with Season 3. I'm very excited for that. I was very excited for Edge Runners. And that's about it. I would really, really love for them to finally make the live-action Neuromancer. Or just a movie of Neuromancer. There's not even an anime or anything. It's just a book. And then they made it into a comics. Or like a graphic novel. But where is our Neuromancer? I mean, come on. Like, it's been in development hell for years. For decades. So we need that. We need that for sure. I think that's all the questions I'm going to be answering for today. But if you have any questions, you can ask them in the comments below, or you can message me. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up, to subscribe to the channel. Based on how many people are watching, I will be creating more content, and I would like to do this in this format where I'm just talking to the camera very casually, just letting you know about my thoughts on Cyberpunk. Next episode, we're going to be talking about the 3 eras of Cyberpunk in relation to my Cyberpunk beginner's guide on the blog. So tune in to hear about my thoughts on Era 1, where we'll be talking about Blade Runner and all those movies that came out in the 1980s and 90s, pre-2000. Yeah. So yeah, stay tuned, and if you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. All right, this has been your host, Alex, your operator, Alex. Over and out.